Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 379, written by bellayesil. Tomatoes galore. Evermore. Okay, this is weird. There's a lot of tomato bushes in our little garden area, and they're taking over. So my mom killed some of it and took all the tomatoes off of them, made pickles with green ones, and we ate the rest. The bushes were thrown to the other side where it's an empty lot except for stuff growing. I was strictly against it because they're still giving tomatoes even though it's getting cold, but it's mom's garden, so I let it go. So far so good. It happened a week or so ago. This morning while I was asleep, mom yelled my name asking me why the hell I replanted the tomatoes. I didn't. But when I went outside, the bushes were back with tomatoes all ripe on them. They weren't there yesterday. I pointed out that even if I replanted them, they literally cannot grow tomatoes and ripen them overnight. And the bushes were all brown due to not being planted for a week or so. But these ones, they're not brown. They're green and huge. So she tells me to clean them up, went to work, and I clean up the bushes again and take all the tomatoes on them. I went inside and pickles were there. But now we have more tomatoes than ever, and they came out of nowhere. I ate like 10 of them while collecting them. My mother saw the bushes. I saw the bushes. Hell, I derooted, or whatever the word is, all the bushes again. I don't know if it was a glitch or something else. And now, after 2 hours, I went to the refrigerator to eat the tomatoes I collected at 7 a.m., and they're gone. The bushes are thrown where they were a week before, and all brown and dead. I called my mother and she has a memory of calling me outside, but she says it's because the weather was great. She doesn't remember the new bushes with the ripened tomatoes overnight. She says that I went out, did some stretching with her in the clean, beautiful weather, and went back to bed. Is she messing with me? Even if she did, I still have the smell of tomatoes on my hands. What happened here? I'm confused and I worked hard for my tomatoes. There's no one at home that could have eaten them as I'm alone. I'm kinda mad and upset. I was going to make tomato soup and a salad. I had dreams and hopes, and now my tomatoes are just gone. Case file number 380, written by VolarRecords. Momentary flashes of nothingness. I've been attracted to UFOs, paranormal, and esoteric stuff since I was younger. I'm now in my early 40s, which is its own weirdness for me. So basically since the unsolved mystery days, during the virus, out of work with nothing but time to think and read on my hands, Reddit has become a bigger thing to me than before, especially the subs relating to UFO/UAP stuff and general weirdness, and animal displays of intelligence. This sub caught my attention a few months ago, and I started going down the rabbit hole of interesting patterns in people's stories. Granted, everything here is anecdotal, so there's always a massive grain of salt. But as with UFO and paranormal experiences, I feel like there are too many seemingly innocuous instances of weirdness for them to all be made up. Like today's story of the server seating people twice, and then being told that the coworker saw her essentially talking to nobody. I also follow science stuff as much as I can, especially now that we're getting into quantum entanglement, consciousness, etc. I've never been religious, but over the last year plus, I've been reminded that the fact that we exist, that life exists at every opportunity, presents an incredible mystery beyond any we can currently fathom. Anyway, my wife mentioned a post from the sub to me, part of a recurring trend of posts about children telling their parents about their past lives. I discovered that there were a few others somewhat similar. People seconds away from deadly car crashes, or actually remembering the crashes, then waking up and avoiding the turn, etc. Of course, it's still all anecdotal, so who really knows? But really interesting nonetheless. So we get to talking about this stuff. She's been working remotely throughout the past 2 years, and I've been left with not much focus besides the world on fire, and a lot of time to wander and follow all this stuff and collect data. So as we're talking about it all, the nature of consciousness, the quantum stuff, the time crystal, etc. My field of vision flickered twice. I'm used to momentary power drops and stuff from living in different places, but this wasn't like that. It was like everything around flashed to nothingness for a split second as we were talking about this stuff. I should have said something to her, but didn't, and really regret that. But it was as if, while we were focusing on these possibilities, my reality snapped to nothingness twice, in maybe the span of a minute or two. I'm aware it could be purely psychological, but it was still weird as hell. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since, wondering if anyone else has experienced something similar. Case notes. So yes, this has happened to other people. I've actually narrated a few stories where people are in their homes or in their cars and people around them also experience it. So the fact that your wife didn't, or maybe she did and also didn't mention anything, people often compare it to the sun just going completely black for a split second or maybe a second. But in some cases, the sound disappears too in that brief period of time. It's like everything simply stops processing. I often bring it up, but it's like playing an MMO and the client-side info not processing, so everything freezes up. But then I think it's more like the monitor stopping to receive information, and the speakers too. So if we are in an MMORPG, a game we all chose to play, but a hyper-realistic one, then there's a central server that's processing all the behind-the-scenes stuff. Then there's a client that's displaying all the graphics for us and stuff like that. But then the client has to transmit that data to the receptors, the monitor, or in this case, however we're connected to the game. It still needs to receive that data. So maybe there's a tiny glitch sometimes, not often. It doesn't even affect everyone, at least as far as we know. Hasn't happened to me yet. That data stream is interrupted for a tiny amount of time, but enough to notice. Bonus file, written by 1987 Raf. It wouldn't be that surprising if a prison ended up being haunted, would it? I'm a prison officer, not a storyteller, so this may be either really long and boring or full of information that's irrelevant, but I think you'll enjoy. We start our nights at approximately 8 p.m. and are locked in until the following morning at 6 a.m. It's essentially a skeleton crew and several hundred prisoners secured behind their doors. This week has been the most activity that I have ever experienced, and a lot of my colleagues who worked had spooky happenings as well. I'm not really a believer per se. However, a lot of spooky unexplained stuff happened that night, and I have no choice but to begin to believe when it's added all up together. I'll start off with some personal backstory and my experiences, and then this week's activity. At night, we usually patrol 2 linked wings as there's no need to have staff patrolling each wing when the prisoners are asleep. There's a wing that I believe is haunted. On the 3rd landing, when cutting in between the 2 wings, there's a sudden feeling of being watched by something from the corner. It freaks me out so much. I refuse to cut through there now, as I just feel cold and watched. I go the longer way around to access that particular landing if I have to answer a cell bell. It's the same on the 1st landing, on the same wing. As soon as you come down the stairs and turn to carry on the patrol, there's another horrible, oppressive feeling of being followed that gives me the heebie-jeebies. I have had emergency cell bells used by prisoners to alert staff to an emergency, go off on cells that are not occupied. Random doors slam when all the doors, apart from toilet, staff room, and office doors, are locked for obvious reasons, and also thought I've seen movement on CCTV cameras when I'm on my own. I've also heard things. However, anyone who has either been in prison or worked in one will know they are noisy, even at night. I have never said anything about this to colleagues because being a prison officer, dealing with hardened criminals, and being spooked by nothing is a surefire way to get the mick taken out of you. Fast forward to this week. Luckily, I was not on this wing and was a member of staff that walks around supporting patrolling staff. I spooked a patrol on a random wing as they didn't hear me, and I made a joke about whether they thought I was a ghost. We got talking about ghosts and stuff, and naturally, the subject of this wing came up. My face must have said it all, because they said, "Don't tell me the 3s as you cut through, and the 1s as you come off the stairs." This is spooky that someone else has felt the same, but also a little bit relieving that it's not just me who feels it. I carried on with my rounds and chatted to people and got talking about my good jump scare in our chat. It turns out that a lot of people who work in prisons believe in ghosts after working night shifts. One of the patrols told me that they also called me to sit with them as they heard a loud bang as though it was a cell door slamming shut. They went and investigated and nothing was there. They had just sat back down and it went again. This obviously spooked them. We began talking about how it's weird that ghosts have been mentioned and that happens. He then had his own story about the wing I think is haunted, where one of the metal security gates slammed shut behind him on the 3's landing as he was cutting through one night. Now, having worked on this wing, that gate doesn't move on its own as it's heavy, let alone slam behind anyone of its own accord. We have a laugh about being blokes and scared of shadows, and I crack on with seeing the next person. To access them, I have to go through a wooden door and a metal gate. It's pitch black and I don't have my torch, so I open the wooden door and then the metal gate and step in to look for the light switch so I can see to lock the door and gate behind me. As I'm doing this, the wooden door slams shut directly behind me with a huge force. I jumped. It wasn't a windy night, and we are indoors, so no breeze or anything. Let me tell you, I have never shut some doors and gates so fast in my life. I spend my rounds talking about the ghosts and seeing what everyone's stories are, and there are interesting stories, but everyone I speak to talks about this haunted wing and either the 3's where they feel like they're being watched or the 1's as they come off the stairs. These are all mentioned. By this point, I had spoken to 6 staff and all of them said the same thing. That's too much of a coincidence for me. I finally go into the haunted wing and I'm talking to the patrol who has all the lights on for what I can now only assume is the obvious, as they have felt it too. And I swear, I see someone moving on the cameras on the 1's, walking towards the office just before they go out of camera. Nothing there and nothing on the playback. Hope you enjoyed my ramblings.